My name's Dominic Sweet, and this is my oral defense for my extended essay. My subject is history, specifically the Group 3 specifically history, and my research question is, to what extent did the Showa Restoration push the Japanese government to declare war between the years of 1926 and 1941? So, I started this whole thing by reading a biography of Hirohito. This was in my sophomore year. I had kind of realized that I would need to do the extended essay if I was going to pursue the IB diploma. So I started sophomore year with this biography of Hirohito. It's by Herbert P. Bix, and this has kind of been my main source for most of it. I've always liked history, and I didn't realize I was going to do Japanese history for my extended essay until I finished the biography and realized this is actually a really great topic to do. And by the time I finished, I started exploring other different sources. So another source that I looked at was a series of podcast episodes by Dan Carlin, Hardcore History. They were titled Supernova in the East. And I finished that around the end of my sophomore year. And then halfway through junior year, we started the meetings and we started looking at the extended essay. And that was when I really started questioning why should I do this topic? I had some information on it, but I also had information on other topics that I could have used. But this topic specifically really interested me because this war with Japan represents about half of the greatest human catastrophe in all of history. Some estimates put the death toll of World War II at 80 million people, which is an incredibly large number that it's impossible to imagine exactly how big that is. This war with Japan, though, was brought on by a number of different reasons, from racism to foreign intervention, from nationalism to dysfunctional politics. It was brought on by so many different reasons, but at the same time, it could have happened to any country, and it could still happen to any country, and it has happened to many countries. It wasn't just Japan that this happened to in history, it happened to other countries as well. And I was going to investigate this to figure out, how exactly did this happen, so that the more we can understand how it happened, the better we can stop something like this from happening again. And when I realized this is the topic that I'd like to do, I started pursuing it in more detail. So I started looking at other sources, like the book The Realm of the Dying Emperor. That was a really great source that I looked at, and it explained a lot more of the human impact of World War II with Japan, which is something you don't always get with really large biographies, especially this one by Herbert P. Bix. It's not, it's very aloof from the situation. It's written by someone who lived, 80 years after the events in which it's discussing. So you don't get that human aspect. It's just cold, hard facts. At the same time, I was also interested in learning about other ways that the war was caused, not just Hirohito and the nationalism that he created, dubbed the Showa Restoration, but also what about the political structure of Japan, which is as much a reason for declaring war as the nationalism. And that got me to the book Japan 1941 by Eddie Hota. And this book was really informative because where Hirohito in the Making of Modern Japan, the biography, explained how Hirohito was related to declaring war and how the Showa Restoration, which was a social and political push by the people around Hirohito to increase nationalism, to increase the connection between the emperor and the divine, and to increase the power the emperor had, which became part of my argument. The other book, Japan 1941, discussed really, what about the political leaders around Hirohito, and how did their decisions politically, regarding foreign influence, regarding the U.S. ambassador, regarding the series of wars Japan fought up to that moment, in the Russo-Japanese War and the Sino-Japanese War, how did those contribute to declaring war? So that's kind of my two arguments. We've got, the nationalism, the Shah restoration, and on the other hand, we have the politics, those political decisions that they made. So problems that I've come up with is that these two arguments are actually very interrelated. And that's the problem I think you'll find in a lot of history, is that it's really hard to draw a line and distinguish between two different factors or two different reasons why some event happened, especially an event as complex as declaring war on the Allies in 1941. That's an incredibly difficult decision to make, and there were many people and many factors involved in it. And that was my main thing, is I had to distinguish between some things, because otherwise it wouldn't be an argument, it would just be me reciting stories. So I drew the line as best I could, and I'm not sure if it was the best line to draw. I did change my mind many times, but I settled at this because I think this made the most sense. Another problem that I encountered was that I'm not an expert in anything historical. I'm 17, and I don't have any of the experience or any of the knowledge regarding the economic, social, or political things that you would need to intuitively understand in order to understand why this happened. I'm coming at this with a very beginner's lens, and with what I know, I've been able to write about it, but there are many things that I would imagine I would have missed that experts would not have missed. Another problem that I encountered is that there's a lot of information that I've gone through, and not all of it means a lot, but it could all be used as evidence. So a big part of my journey has been sifting through that and selecting only the most important ones, or combining pieces of evidence where they could, so that I could fit more of it into a 4,000-word essay. As for meeting benchmarks, like I said, I've got more than enough content to work with. It's just a matter of making sure that I can make it all count in the right way. As for a win, I realized actually just a short while ago that my IB history class covers a big portion of my topic, which is kind of interesting, but also maybe I could have chosen a slightly different ones, but I didn't know, so it's fine. Anyway, that concludes my oral defense.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you. Did you want to start with any questions, Pierce?
I have one.
Yes.
As far as the nationalism thing, did you start with Hirohito, or did you look even before that with the Meiji Constitution and stuff?
So I didn't. Well, part of what made me choose Hirohito, made me start reading it beginning of sophomore year, was the fact that I didn't know anything about Japan before. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I started with Hirohito, but I was kind of interested in, I didn't know anything about Japan, so I was just trying to increase my global perspective, know as much as I can about, the world. And that made me choose it, and that was what put me on this journey to extended essay.
I was just going to acknowledge that at the beginning you asked some really good questions, and by the beginning I mean the beginning of this whole process about where to limit yourself in terms of the retelling of establishing context. So you were thinking about that from the beginning, and then I remember in the summer you said, oh wait, I feel like I'm not going to meet this deadline, but you have all this content. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel your essay stands in this exact moment if it were to be turned in?
I think I've written a lot about specific people, specific people like Hirohito, and Japan 1941 talks a lot about Fumimaro Konoe, who was the prime minister of Japan for like 4 out of 5 years before 1941. So he played a big part in both declaring war on China and then pushing Japan to sign the tripartite agreement with the Axis powers, Germany and Italy. I've written a lot about this person, but I think a lot of the evidence is very minor. I think if I could combine it if I could combine it together with, and that way I could use similar analysis, because it is similar evidence, I think that'd be a lot better. Does that answer your question?
And I mean, do you feel like we could turn in your essay right now and it would pass?
No, I don't. I think, well, for one thing, formatting would be a big part. I have not formatted it to an appropriate essay.
And that will happen in the next couple of.
Like probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Great. Okay, I just want to make sure that we are all in the same place. Okay, great. I also want to say that I see a future professor in the making here. I just think that you've got a lot of natural interest, and so I hope that you continue to pursue this.
That was going to be my
Yeah.
question, actually, was you mentioned some of the limitations are you're not an expert, you're 17. Still very impressive that this is your first research work with training wheels, so to speak. How does this experience kind of inform what you think you might want to do next?
Well, I don't think it was just this experience, but I would like to major in history in college. I don't know where else I would go with that, but I would love to do something history. That would be awesome. I think because history is kind of like my pastime, so I would really love that. But you know, it's not just this experience; it's all the experiences. It was the history IA that we did several months ago. I think that too contributed.
Do you think if you had to do this all over again, you'd do a different topic or a different approach? What would you change?
Well, different approach.
You could roll back to the beginning of junior year. What might you do differently?
I would look at a different topic because it made me wonder. I've been preparing for this basically since sophomore year, so I had, you could say, I had a leg up, but I could have chosen a totally new topic. You know, like anything. You know, the story of South Africa, for example. That would be totally different, and I had very little information about that because I had known something about Japan when we started the process. So I think it would have been cool if I had researched a new thing that I had no idea about, and that way I would have had information about Japan and this new topic, whatever it would be.
Have you visited Japan?
No.
So you just picked up the book about
I
Hirohito
just- yeah,
in
basically.
sophomore year? All right.
Yeah, it was in the library, and I was like, well, this looks interesting.
I
So
love it. Yay, libraries.
Great. Yay for curious people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you,
thank you,
Dominic.
Dominic. Woo.